Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode here on the Matt Lastalia Show. Looking at some rebranding, actually, so this will remain and will always be the Matt Lastalia Show, but I think, as goes with what you can't see here, that blurred out LLC, the actual company, which is Real Resilience. So I think we'll start doing the intro, welcome to Real Resilience with Matt Lastalia. So that makes more sense, I think. And it's a little bit easier to search, right? Like, Lastalia is kind of a funky one, so for those, if I'm able to make that change, then I can tell people I've run into that so many times that this actually does lead into part of the conversation that I want to have today. But I've met people and they ask about the show and how they can find it, and I'm like, oh, it's my name, Matt Lastalia, and then that turns into, they're like, oh, okay, and because nobody wants to go through that awkward moment of, well, how do you spell it? And then I'm going to have to remember that. It's something easier to remember and something easier for you guys to be able to spread it out, Probably a little bit easier for you to talk about Real Resilience than to talk about some dude, Matt Lastalia. So, anyway, so today I wanted to talk about this concept, really a huge premise of this entire show, and it's all about, again, it's like self-improvement, right? And I don't like getting lost in the weeds of the motivational speakers and all of this stuff. I really try to make sure that everything that we talk about is practicable action. You can actually do this in your life. You can actually take what we're talking about and put it into action and see tangible results and check on your progress and be able to look at what you're doing and identify if changes that you're making are working or if they're not working. And so without that, what are we doing, right? That's kind of the whole point of this thing. It's not just to talk philosophy, it's to talk about real, actual actions that we can take that will get us on the road to the path of living the life that we really want to live. And so, and this idea of self-improvement, the way the angle that I wanted to tackle it today is actually how self-improvement can bring us together as a community, as a people, and because I think a lot of times this can be a little counterintuitive, and so I wanted to bring up a couple of concepts that I think are really powerful and really important for us when we're thinking about self-improvement, because I think I know that some people get a little bit hesitant when it comes to really putting the focus on themselves. They don't want to feel selfish and they don't want to feel self-involved, and they're a lot of the ways that people identify themselves is through how they interact with others, which I think is absolutely crucial. And so these two things don't sit on polar opposite ends. You're not focused on self-improvement while not considering the people around you and your friends and your loved ones and your family and your kids and your parents, and your work. Like, all of that is kind of interwoven, and that's really what I wanted to discuss today. But before we dive right in, we first have to accept this premise. And so in what I'm saying, when we're talking about how self-improvement can bring us together, we have to understand that the premise here is that we're not necessarily together, in a cohesive way, like probably we've ever been in the history of, the written history of mankind, because all of our interactions, all of our cohesiveness have all been very, geographical up until this point. When you think about it, it's started off hunter-gatherers, and we're going and working with a small tribe and maybe even collaborating with other tribes, but all interactions are face-to-face, and that's the way that we've evolved, is to interact face-to-face. And as that's progressed, even as technology has evolved and everything, really everything still revolved around being very much focused on like in person. And I think where it got to is this sense of collectiveness around like your tribe, and really that's where it started and that's where it is, and it's just how we kind of define our tribe. That's the thing that's really changed. And because of most recently, this is coming from an American perspective, right? And I know that we have a very broad audience spanning across the globe, which thank you guys, I appreciate you coming. But I think what we've really started to lean towards was identification of tribes by country. Like people are Indian, people are Japanese, people are American, whatever the case may be, maybe Filipino, from Indonesia. There's obviously all of the countries, and depending on where you're at and the culture that's there can very much dictate the level of importance that has. But I think what's happening now with technology is that we're really looking at a different shift of tribes, because I don't think as a people that we're ever really going to get away from, at least not in our lifetime or any foreseeable one, without significant changes to who we are, to how we are. I think we're always going to be tribal, and the question is just, what is that going to look like? And as technology really continues to become such a significant part of our lives, like integral, like we essentially cannot operate in this day and age the way that we do across the globe without this technology. We're using it right now. So we're kind of becoming symbiotic in that nature. Like, yes, we could go back, but man, there would be a lot of pain, there would be a lot of struggle, there'd be a lot of death, if all of our technological capabilities went out and we all went back to hunter-gatherers. Like, something terrible would have had to happen, and it would be very bad. And could we survive as a species? Yeah, of course. We did it before, we could do it again. But it's not. That's not likely, right? So we're here to talk again about, like how I led off, with a very practical, kind of discussion about self-improvement. And so when we think about the technology and the fact that it exists, and we are taking into consideration our tribal nature, it seems like our proclivity to stick our tribe with our country is starting. At least I'm feeling this here in the States. I'm feeling like our like I said, our proclivity to stick our tribe with our country is starting to reduce. It's starting to diminish a bit, and it's very interesting, because I think it's not that people here don't think of themselves as Americans. Some people there's a certain percentage of our population now who don't connotate that positively. They think of being American as being bad, and there's other parts of it that think of it as being very good, and then there's everyone in between. But what I think is going on is we're really starting to lean into the technology and into these groups and into our own kind of smaller tribes, and these tribes, the interesting shift here is that they no longer have to be geographical. because of technology, you can interact and you can engage with people across the world who have shared interests with you. And really, this probably started with gaming, was probably one of the most significant movements of this in the beginning. And it's spread out to almost every facet of life. And so you could be in a group with people about people who collect, trains, like model trains, and these people, like, you can have them all over the world, and like, oh, look at these model trains that I have. You could have people that, like you guys, that come here. Like I said, you're all across the globe, and we're interested in resilience and overcoming and the strength and grit of character that's required, and what we can do to kind of work those resilience, mental, emotional muscles out. But then again, this is the beautiful thing, is that you don't have to be a part of just one tribe, right? Like, you can be here, and this can be important to you, and this can be one tribe that you're in. Then you can also be in other tribes, that focus on different things. And that's the beauty of the technology. But I think there's a significance when it comes to, when we think about who this impacts, right? Because this isn't universal. Like I said, while the technology does have a kind of stranglehold, if you will, over the human population across the globe, the impacts that we're seeing where people are kind of retreating from the interpersonal interactions that were required for all of mankind, for all of history. People were starting to retreat from that a little bit, and there was all the talk of it, like, these negative impacts of social media, and people aren't having as much face-to-face contact, and then that was just, avalanched on top of with all of the COVID restrictions. And so everyone wanted to be safe. You're at home, and not only can you stay home and avoid unnecessary contact with people, but you can also still continue to engage with the world at large. And so that was a huge kind of power shift. It like fast forwarded us probably 5-10 years into the future of what we would be seeing when it comes to our level of social, personal, in-person interactions versus the percentage online. We just heavily pushed ourselves in that direction for safety, to try to make sure that we're avoiding unnecessary infections and all of that stuff. I'm not gonna get into the COVID stuff today, but yeah, it's a significant factor, a variable that came in and really weighted it this way. But it's interesting because it still does depend upon kind of where you live. Now, the more it's really interesting, the more populated areas you get to. Now, speaking this from my personal experience, the more populated areas that I've lived in is, it can result, depending on your personality type, of course, but there's a little bit more removal from society. While you may, in bigger cities, you may see a higher importance placed on social networks, or like infrastructure is what I mean. Not like social networks, but like infrastructure, subways, metros, and you see like homelessness on the streets and all of this. And so you get a different kind of mentality about it, because you're constantly surrounded by people. But at the same time, those are the people who are least likely to know the names of their neighbors. You get more removed, you get into the suburbs, it gets a little bit different, and you get further removed into the small towns like we're in right now, and you really get to know the people around you, because there's not that many. And so when new people come in, it's like, whoa, like, if you only have 20 people that live around you in your immediate vicinity, and somebody moves out and somebody moves in, like, that's a significant deal. It's a significant percentage, in comparison, change of the people around you. And so, like, I've brought it up on the show before. We've had people come and drive up to our home to discuss, just to introduce themselves and to talk about, all the property lines and everything out here and all that fun stuff. And so it's just different because it's never really happened. I've never had, as much as I've moved, I think maybe once ever I've had a neighbor come up, like you'd see in shows and stuff, they come up and like bring you like, hey, look, I baked you this, like, welcome to the neighborhood. And that was on a military post. And so everyone was very much in the same kind of mentality, same kind of driven mission, purpose, and everything. But again, back to the point is that if there is a difference in this type of experience, in the type of, importance that we put on interpersonal relationships and seeing each other in person, and that may be weighted heavier in smaller populations. But the bottom line is that if you look across the board, and especially, like I said, with COVID and still impacting our lives today, you can see that it's pretty clear that the premise is established that we are not as cohesive, we're not as connected interpersonally as we have been. And so the whole idea here is that I still believe in my heart that the number one thing that you can do to improve your life is focus on you, right? And so now we're gonna look at how focusing on you can really work to start to change that lack of connectiveness that has occurred kind of on a larger scale. And that's really, it's been the premise of this show for a very long time, is that by focusing on you and improving yourself, you then improve your life. And that inherently, it's almost like a ripple effect shooting out from where you are. And so if your ripples that are going out are positive and they're improving, then the lives of those around you are going to improve naturally, inherently, so long as the steps that you're taking to improve your life are moral, or you're not stepping on other people in order to accomplish your improvement, your goals. So all of that, as long as you're taking methodical, thought out and non aggressive, abusive behaviors in order to reach your goals, then you're going to be improving the lives of the people around you. And then that sets them up to be able to improve the lives of the people around them. But so all of that sounds really great, but I wanted to actually dive a little bit more into detail rather than, like I said, I don't want to sit here and philosophize. I want to discuss this in a way that actually makes it real, right? So getting back, I would like to, for those that have been around the show for a long time, that I get kind of bent around words and the importance of words, because you know what? Words matter. I think I did a whole episode about how words matter. So, but when, I think it's just important to be clear, and so that way when we're communicating about this stuff, that we are all on the same page, right? And so when we think about self-improvement, or when I say the term self-improvement, this is going to hit people in a bunch of different ways. Each person listening to this is going to have their own kind of personal take on it, because everyone's on their own individual journey. So if you are somebody who acknowledges that they're not necessarily in the best physical shape, one of the things that you might think of is, self-improvement means I need to go to the gym, I need to run, I need to walk, or any of these physical exercising activities. It might also mean, in that same vein, those same types of people, they might not focus so much on the exercise. They might say, I just need to eat better. I need to cut out all of this fast food, and I really need to put focus on my diet, and I need to get right. That's the area I need to attack. Other people are going to have negative connotations where they're like, self-help gurus, blah, 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 blah. And so they're going to have all of these different types of reactions and thoughts to this, and none of them are invalid. They all come from a place of, like, kind of your personal experience. But there's where I like to focus a lot of our conversations on is a lot more on the kind of the emotional side, the mental side, the resilience, the grit, the determination. So if the confidence. So if you're not confident, how do we build the confidence? And the thing is, like I said in the beginning, this is all stuff that's interwoven. It's all together. It's you can't. Let me start this a different way. So your emotional state is going to impact your physical state, and your physical state is going to impact your emotional state. That's a little bit easier one to unpack, so we'll unpack that one first. So your physical state, so if you haven't worked out, or if you don't run, if you're not physically active, you don't lead, you don't even have to do that kind of focused activity. If you lead an active lifestyle, if you like to go out and hike and just actually get up and move your body, if you work in a job where you're moving a lot, that's all really good. But if you're not, and like a lot of us, like me sitting here, not very mobile, and but if you're one of those, then it's really important to put the focus on making sure that you're getting up and you're getting that activity, and because when you get up and when you're moving, then you're starting to get your body starting to operate again like it was when you think about evolutionary biology. It starts to operate in a way where kind of more how we were meant to operate, in the sense that, like, our muscles are meant to be used, they're meant to be flexed, they're meant to be stressed. Like, we're meant to deal with this stress, and when we don't have that stress, then our bodies start to become, like jello. Like, all of you doughy folks at home, it's like, there's no, and that's okay. I'm not judging, and just saying that it's it's not good, and you can feel it, and that lack of exercise, that lack of dietary discipline, that lack of movement is it will inevitably, and it is, if you're one of these people, it has a negative impact on your emotional state. I mean, think about it when you reflect. Like, it's hard if you're overweight and you can see it and you can feel it, and you look in the mirror and that affects you emotionally, and then it also, like, it makes it harder to do things. And so when you go in to try and do things and you can't, or you see other people that are going out and doing things, like, oh man, I wish I could do that, but I can't go play ultimate frisbee because I'm 350 pounds and 5'6", like I'm 5'6", I'm trying to imagine, that'd be like two of me. But and if that's something that you're inclined to do, but anything, if you're like, oh man, I've always wanted to play golf, but I just, I have a bum shoulder. Like, it can even be like that, but injury stuff, and that can have that negative impact on you mentally, and then that affects your confidence, and that affects the way that you interact with people. And if someone's like, oh yeah, we're gonna go play basketball, like, yeah man, that's cool, have fun. It's if that's something that you like to do and other people are going to do it, but you can't because of physical restrictions, choice based or otherwise, it's not a positive influence, right? On the flip side, if you do that and you focus on the physical stuff, you focus on working out, you focus on the diet, and then opportunities come up, you can actually take advantage of these quote unquote random opportunities that present themselves. You can you can go and participate in an event that's more physically demanding on the fly. If you're like, hey, we're gonna go up to my Yasmin and I, we went up to 3 dunes. This state, I forget, there was like a mixture of state and national parks up in northern Indiana where it's at Lake Michigan, and we went up there to go do like just explore the dunes. And there's this 3 dune challenge that we didn't know about until we got there, and we're like, oh, that sounds really cool. It's basically you climb to the top of 3 different dunes. And it was funny because we were like, we saw the height of them, and we had hiked up to the highest mountain in Virginia and several other relatively close mountains of that height as well, and we did really good, and we loved it. It was a great thing. So, and those were, what was it, like 5,000 feet, I think was the top. 5,400 maybe was the top of Virginia, and Mount Rogers, I think it was. And this one was like the dune. Indiana's so flat. That top dune, I forget which one of the 3 was the top, but I think the top one was like 197 feet. And we're like, oh wow, that's gonna be so brutal. But you go there and you're starting at nothing, and you're going up, and basically like the whole walk up is loose dune sand. So you're going up like 200 feet almost in a straight line. There's like a straight line, a couple of like windy paths, and then like another straight line up where it's just soft sand. And so like we got to the top, and I remember being like, whew, haven't done a lot of walking lately. I can feel it. But we still had maintained our diet well enough, and we'd still maintain, a relative amount of exercise to the point where we could go out and just choose to do that, on the fly without preparing. And so without that, our options for what we can do become more limited. And that's not how I want to live. I want to have as many options, and I want to be able to make adjustments on the fly, and to be able to take advantage of opportunities that may require some physical rigor. But so now, and I think that's pretty well established. I don't think that there should be too much pushback on that concept. The other side, which was actually kind of new to me within the last couple of years, is how your emotions can affect your physical state. And I know, like, we're all aware of stress and how stress can, kind of wear you down and make you feel like maybe tired and just in like kind of mental fogginess and stuff like that. But I mean like actual physical, like your body. I didn't know this, and it was really interesting because I have my back injury that I earned rightfully. I guess it's a good time as any to bring it up. I got hurt while I was in the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, and I only venture to go into these details because it is Veterans Day, and so happy Veterans Day to all you vets out there. But so I got hurt my back, and since then, I'll have kind of back flare-ups, and I will go through these phases of where it feels good and it doesn't feel so good, and I started noticing that when this is funny because so what would happen is like something like a stressful conversation would come up, or I would be stressing out about a thought, and my back would hurt, and I would think that I was conjuring this up, or like making up the pain as a way to get out of having like harder conversations with people. And I was like, man, you gotta like not do that. You gotta step up and have the conversations. And it was crazy because it would be so bad, it would be debilitating, and that was very frustrating for me. And it was later when I got out of the Army and I went through like kind of a pain clinic. Like when I went to a new pain clinic, they sent me through this class, and they were talking about the connection between your stress states and your pain, your level of pain, especially those people with back pain. And it clicked, and I had already essentially figured it out. And I was like, every time that I get stressed out, my back freaking freaks out. And so, I started really, really leveraging a lot of the tools and stuff that we discuss here in order to, one, get over and handle stressful situations, but also to make sure that my back wasn't in pain whenever I got, stressed out about something, whenever, hard times came up. And so, because that's, the mental stress is enough. You don't need the back stuff too in those periods of time. So, it's just, it goes back to the point where all of this stuff is interwoven. It's all together and it all impacts each other. And so I think when we look at that, and when we look at how, our the whole concept of the self-improvement, right? Self-improvement also could be how you conduct yourself in relationships. A lot of people think like, oh man, I always pick the wrong people, or I always screw up relationships, or whatever. I never get along with my bosses. All of that stuff is to me, are branches out from the emotional fitness and from the physical fitness. Those two kind of large components are the baseline, right? If you get your own emotional house in order, and you understand strategies and techniques to deal with stress and to build confidence and courage and so on in that regard, and you work on the physical side of the house where you're bringing in the stress for your body and you're dietarily conscious, when you're making these decisions about what you're going to eat, all of that creates a better foundation for you to operate with a greater level of competence in those relationships as well. Because if you're not, again, if I'm stressed out and I don't have strategies to manage and mentally kind of compute the stress and to manage it and to get to the other side of it, I'm going to have a really hard time communicating in a relationship. And if that is also triggering pain in my body, then that's going to make everything all the more difficult. It's going to make it more difficult to want to go work out. It's going to make it more difficult. And when that stress happens, you want to eat poorly. And so like it all becomes circular, again, in a negative way. So again, it's just all of it ties together. And this is where you start to look at kind of how this spreads out. And so like when we were talking in the beginning, we have this new sense of tribe, right? We have these new capabilities of tribalness, which, some people will hear, the term or the phrase like, oh, we're tribal, and they'll see it in a kind of negative way, like, oh, we're so tribal. It's so bad that we're so tribal. And it's not necessarily the case. Tribes are amazing. It's just about what kind of tribe you're falling into. And to me, that's why this all comes back to self-improvement. Because if you're looking at self-improvement, it's going to be very difficult for you to fall into a tribe of bad influences, right? It's going to be hard to fall into some sort of crazy racially based online fanatic group if you're trying to focus on how to improve your life. Because it all starts with introspection, right? It all starts with identifying where you're at now, seeing where, really taking the time to embrace some silence, which I know for me is one of the most difficult things to do. I am all about learning and expanding, and I want to listen to interviews with amazing people, and I want to hear about current events, and then I want to produce content. And so there's a lot of consumption and production that's happening, but the processing is something that I have to make a conscious effort to do. I have to turn it off. And one of my favorite ways, one of my particular favorite strategies, and I know this isn't something that everyone has, but we're blessed enough to be able to have a little small 2-person sauna. And when I go in there, I like to make sure that at least half the time, and I try to make it the more difficult time, the second half of my sauna sessions, I will do in complete silence. So I'll start off and maybe I'll listen to a show or whatever, and then I cut it and do the second half in complete silence. And I let that be my kind of introspection time, where I can really work through and process some stuff. But it's also important to do it in a time where you're not not emotionally stressed or not physically stressed, like there, which is kind of both. Where you can really sit with yourself and you can really contemplate, where you are, and how that sits in with where you want to be, who you are, and where that sits in with who you want to be. There's so many layers to this that you have to dissect yourself in these different kind of lenses in the things that are important to you. What is it that you value? And sitting down and figuring out what drives you, what's your motivation, what's your purpose. And that's something that I've really latched onto is finding your spark, finding that thing that really lights you up, the thing that really, you don't have to try to get energized for it. You don't. It's the thing where you've gotten up out of bed early without an alarm clock because you have this thing going on. It's when you're thinking about it, when you're doing it, after you're done doing it, it energizes you. It's that stuff. And so when you're able to identify those things, then you can use that as the kind of centerpiece, as the kind of foundation for self-improvement. Like, okay, well, this is what drives me, this is what motivates me. How do I build myself around this? How do I build actions and everything around this, so that way I can have more of these spark moments. I can have more moments where I'm super energized and pumped up. And so that's a huge focus of what we try and do here. And in so doing, when we're looking at this, we go back to those online tribes, and you have, this plethora. You have online tribes. You can have hybrid tribes where it's part online, part in person. You can have fully in-person tribes. Almost everything is integrated a little bit online because that's kind of how we communicate and organize now. So like almost all in-person tribes that aren't like solely work, and even work has gone into this as well, but are hybrid, because it's so much easier to communicate and organize there. And so, like for me, I have Team Red, White, and Blue, which is a really great organization that brings in veterans and active duty service members and civilians, and it's like it's a group that's focused on physical fitness. And so all of the Team RWB stuff that I've seen and participated in, it has been running. But it doesn't have to be, and they've done, I remember I went to like a Thanksgiving or a Christmas event where everyone went there, and it was like a white elephant kind of a thing, and everyone got a gift, and it was really cool, it was a great way to integrate that kind of stuff, but it was all based around a centralized purpose. We all went there knowing and understanding that, while we all have different individual goals, we all have a centralized theme of a goal, which is, we identify fitness as a priority. You may be training for a marathon. I might be training for, a Tough Mudder. You might be training for a triathlon. You might just be running for health and just for fun. It doesn't really matter, because everyone's there to run, to be fit. And in so doing, you're going to talk about diet. You're going to talk about other stuff you're doing. You're going to be talking about gear and all of the stuff you have commonalities in. And so that's a tribe. That's a great tribe. We have another, Yasmin and I have fallen in love with Ultimate Frisbee. And so we have the tribe of Ultimate Frisbee that we had in Virginia. Amazing people. We have a new tribe out here of Ultimate Frisbee players, which is a completely different type of group, but it's another amazing people. And it's so interesting because now we're in like Indiana State University is right here. And so we have a lot of the kids who play on like the club team for the university will come and play with us. So it's a much younger group here than we had in Virginia, which was actually a lot older on average. And it was interesting. Like crazy things happen at these events. Like I remember I met this guy that had only come out once as far as I had seen. and he ran a business, and he had a couple of his employees were out there, and they were all playing together, just with a mix of all of us that were out there in Virginia, throwing the frisbee around. And we were talking. He was like, "Oh yeah, what do you do?" And I told him, I was like, "Well, I have a podcast. It's all based on mental and emotional resilience. I have training programs that I provide for individuals, and I'm working on just spreading that out for businesses as well." And at the time, I was actively building courses for businesses, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's really interesting. I want that." I was like, "That's great." And the timing didn't work out for us, particularly because we were getting ready to move, and so that didn't work out. But it was like, but even those kinds of opportunities, those things when you put yourself out there, and these opportunities come up, and especially when there's a core purpose, even if the business side wasn't the reason that drove us together, it was a core, like, oh, you're out here, you play, like, there's a certain baseline understanding of who you are. Like, you're the type of person, like, you're physically fit, you go out there, and and then there's the communication, like, okay, you can communicate on this level, and then that gets into more of the business side, which I'm not going to venture into too much detail right now. But just the point being that the opportunities for establishing really positive and impactful tribes, it's so powerful and so great right now. So I think that while some people could look at this as a really kind of like a negative thing and say tribalism is bad and we need to come together, I'm like, well, I think we can come together, but I think we can come together in tribes, and I think really how we come together is the cross tribalness, right? Where you're not just in one tribe. Being in one tribe it's not enough. You can have different areas of focus and dedication. Like, I have another tribe that's fully on. So both of those, Team Red, White, and Blue, and the Ultimate Frisbee, are all hybrid, right? We organize and everything online, but then we meet up and we do all of our activities in person. So it's like hybrid, leaning on in person. I have another one that's fully online, and that's it's called the Nomad Network. It was started and run by Jason Stapleton. He's an entrepreneur and helps people kind of launch their businesses and stuff. And really, really great guy. Really great training programs. And but yeah, that's fully online. But the thing is, if I have a question about my business, like, okay, I'm thinking about switching distribution platforms, what do you guys think? I can't really spit that to Team RWB. I can't have that be my soul. Like, I could, and there might randomly be a person there who might know something, but it's like asking your overweight, non-exercising best friend what exercise regimen is best. Like, they'll probably have an answer because everyone wants to be able to answer you with something, but maybe it's not the right person to ask about that particular question. Maybe it's better to get a cake recipe from them. I'm just talking shit, but I feel like we've done what we needed to come here and do today, and that was really to look at how self-improvement can really impact you personally, but really how it can bring us together, how it can create stronger bonds across whether in person or spread out far apart. It doesn't matter. So I wanted to thank you guys so much for coming and spending time with me here today. I pray this was of great value to you, and the thing that I've really thought about and kind of kept leaning back to today was one of a quote that I'm sure that almost all of you are familiar with, from Henry David Thoreau. I believe it was from Walden, his book Walden, in 1846, where he said, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." And he goes on. His quote is obviously much longer. It's part of a book. So, but the thought that I had, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to forget, is don't fall prey to your desperation. Listen to it. Let it speak loudly inside of you. Let it drive you to the life you desire. That's what I think that voice is there to do. I don't think it should be brushed off. I don't think you should forget about it. I think it should be the driving force, right? And so, again, I just wanted to thank you guys for coming here. I hope that you let these thoughts kind of marinate and drive you. Because at the end of the day, once this is over and you're done listening to it, like, you have some choices to make, right? Are you going to let what we talked about today kind of sit with you and have you start to look at some groups that are potentially out there that are aligned with your purpose? Maybe you're not even fully aware of your purpose yet. Maybe that's where you need to start. But wherever you need to start, are you going to take an action on that? Or are you going to click to the next episode? Or are you going to click to another show? Or are you going to, what are you going to do? And really, your life is in your hands. And so I just ask you to be deliberate, be conscious and choose your next step deliberately. Thank you guys so much. And I will see you here again on Tuesday for some more Real Resilience with Matt Lestalia.